The Sheriff's Gamble by Clara Winslow. The telegram crackled in Sheriff Jake Morrison's weathered hands as he read the words that would change everything. Katherine arriving Tuesday stop. Father's debts inherited stop. Saloon now yours stop. Good luck stop. Jake stared at the yellow paper, his jaw tightening. 3 years he'd been waiting for this moment, 3 years since old Henry Beaumont had lost his saloon in that fateful poker game. The silver dollar had been Jake's prize, his ticket out of law enforcement and into respectable business ownership. Now Henry's daughter was coming to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. The courthouse clock chimed noon as Jake folded the telegram and slipped it into his vest pocket. Through the dusty window of his office he could see the afternoon stage approaching, dust billowing behind the 4 horses. His stomach twisted with an unfamiliar nervousness. Katherine Beaumont stepped down from the stagecoach with the grace of a woman accustomed to better circumstances. Her traveling dress was simple but well-tailored, a deep blue that brought out her eyes. She carried herself with quiet dignity despite the weariness that clung to her like the road dust on her skirts. Jake emerged from his office, badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Miss Beaumont?" She turned, and Jake felt something shift inside his chest. Her photograph hadn't done justice to the intelligence in her green eyes or the determined set of her chin. This wasn't going to be as simple as he'd hoped. "Sheriff Morrison, I presume." Her voice carried the refinement of Eastern education, but there was steel beneath the velvet. "I believe we have business to discuss." "Indeed we do, ma'am. Perhaps we could speak privately." Jake gestured toward his office. Katherine followed him inside, her gaze taking in the sparse furnishings and the wanted posters covering one wall. She settled into the chair across from his desk with practiced composure, though Jake noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she smoothed her skirts. "I'll be direct, Sheriff. I've come to reclaim my father's saloon." Jake leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Miss Beaumont. The silver dollar belongs to me now, fair and square." Color rose in Katherine's cheeks. "Fair and square? You took advantage of a sick old man." "Your father wasn't sick when he sat down at that poker table," Jake replied evenly. "He was drunk, maybe, but he knew what he was doing. The deed is legal and recorded." Katherine's hands clenched in her lap. "The silver dollar has been in my family for 15 years. My mother died in the room above that saloon. It's all I have left of them." The pain in her voice caught Jake off guard. He'd expected anger, perhaps tears of frustration, but not this raw grief that made his chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. "I'm sorry for your losses, Miss Beaumont, but that doesn't change the facts." "Then perhaps we can arrange some sort of partnership?" The word seemed to cost her considerable effort. "I have experience running the establishment. You have the legal claim. Surely we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A lady running a saloon? That's hardly proper." "Proper won't put food on my table or a roof over my head?" Katherine shot back. "I've been managing my father's affairs for the past 2 years. I know every supplier, every regular customer, every detail of the business. You may own the building, Sheriff, but you don't know the first thing about running it." She had a point, though Jake wasn't about to admit it. He'd been so focused on winning the saloon that he hadn't given much thought to actually operating it. "What exactly are you proposing?" Katherine straightened, sensing an opening. "I'll manage the day-to-day operations. You collect your share of the profits. We split everything 50-50. 60-40, Jake countered. "In my favor, since I own the property. 55-45, and I keep the living quarters upstairs." Jake found himself fighting a smile at her negotiating skills. "Deal, but there are conditions." "I'm listening." "No gambling. I won't have the place turning into a den of vice under my watch." Katherine's eyebrows rose. "You want a poker game to win the saloon, but you object to gambling." "That's different." "How?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "It just is. No gambling or no deal." Katherine studied his face for a long moment. "Very well. What else?" "You answer to me. Any major decisions get my approval first." "Within reason?" "My definition of reason." Katherine's lips compressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Anything else?" "One more thing." Jake leaned forward. "Why didn't you come back when your father was still alive? Word is you haven't been home in over 5 years. Pain flickered across Katherine's features. "That's none of your business, Sheriff." It is, if we're going to be partners. Katherine was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My father and I had disagreements about my future. He wanted me to marry a man of his choosing, someone who could help with the business. I wanted to choose my own path, so I left for Boston thinking I could make my own way. She looked down at her hands. Pride is a costly thing, Sheriff. By the time I swallowed mine enough to write, it was too late. He was already gone. The honesty in her admission hit Jake like a physical blow. He recognized the weight of regret. He carried plenty of his own. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Katherine lifted her chin. I don't need pity, Sheriff. I need work. Over the following weeks, Jake discovered that Katherine Beaumont was as capable as she was beautiful. She transformed the Silver Dollar from a rowdy drinking establishment into something approaching respectability. She introduced a lunch menu that drew in townspeople who'd never set foot in the saloon before. She hired a piano player and organized Saturday evening social gatherings that became the talk of the town. Jake found himself spending more and more time at the saloon, ostensibly to keep an eye on his investment, but really because he enjoyed Katherine's company. She was intelligent and well-read, with strong opinions about everything from politics to literature. Their conversations often stretched late into the evening, long after the last customer had departed. You're an unusual lawman, Sheriff, Katherine observed one evening as they tallied the day's receipts. Most men in your position would be content to collect their profits and leave the work to others. Jake looked up from the ledger. Maybe I'm not most men. No, Katherine agreed, her green eyes studying his face. You're not. The tension between them had been building for weeks, a slow burn that neither acknowledged but both felt. Jake had caught himself watching Katherine as she moved through the saloon, admiring the efficient grace of her movements, and the way she handled difficult customers with perfect composure. More than once he'd noticed her gaze lingering on him as well. Katherine, he began, then stopped himself. What is it, Jake? The use of his given name sent warmth spreading through his chest. Nothing. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing, and they both knew it. The crisis came on a Thursday evening in late September. Jake was making his evening rounds when Doc Patterson burst into his office. Sheriff, you'd better get over to the Silver Dollar quick. There's trouble brewing. Jake's blood ran cold. He'd been expecting this. Word had gotten around about Katherine's past, and some of the town's more righteous citizens had been making noise about having a fallen woman running a business. He found a crowd gathered outside the saloon, led by Reverend Michaels and his wife. Through the window, Jake could see Katherine standing behind the bar, her face pale but determined. Sheriff Morrison, Reverend Michaels called out as Jake approached. This has gone on long enough. That woman has no business running a respectable establishment. Her reputation alone is enough to corrupt our young people. What reputation would that be, Reverend? Jake asked coldly. Everyone knows she left town under questionable circumstances. Unmarried women don't simply disappear to Boston without good reason. Jake felt anger building in his chest. Miss Beaumont's personal affairs are none of your concern. They are when she's corrupting our community, Mrs. Michaels interjected. A woman like that has no place among decent people. A woman like what? Katherine's voice cut through the crowd as she emerged from the saloon. Her chin was raised defiantly, but Jake could see the hurt in her eyes. You know perfectly well what we mean, Reverend Michaels said sternly. Your father may have been blind to your failings, but we are not. My failings? Katherine's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tremor beneath. What failings would those be? Working honestly to support myself. Trying to honor my father's memory by maintaining his business? Don't play innocent with us, Mrs. Michaels snapped. We know why you really left town. We know about your condition. Katherine went white. My condition? The baby you carried. Did you think we'd forgotten? Jake felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He looked at Katherine, saw the devastation in her eyes, and knew the truth. She'd been pregnant when she left town, pregnant and unmarried, fleeing the shame and scandal. I lost the baby, Katherine said quietly. 3 months after I arrived in Boston, I lost everything. The crowd fell silent, the wind taken out of their righteous sails by the raw pain in her voice. That doesn't change anything, Reverend Michaels said, though his tone had lost some of its fire. A woman of loose morals. That's enough. Jake stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun belt. Miss Beaumont has done nothing but improve this town since she arrived. She's conducted herself with more dignity and integrity than half the people standing here. Sheriff, surely you can't think this is right. I can and I do. Jake's voice was steel. Miss Beaumont is under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Reverend Michaels lingered, his face disapproving. You're making a mistake, Sheriff. That woman will bring nothing but trouble. The only trouble I see is people who can't mind their own business, Jake replied flatly. When the street had cleared, Jake turned to find Katherine still standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Katherine. Don't. She held up a hand to stop him. Just don't. She turned and fled back into the saloon. Jake followed, finding her collapsed in a chair at one of the tables, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Katherine, listen to me. You heard them. They're right. Her voice was broken. I am exactly what they said I am. Jake knelt beside her chair, his large hands gentle as he turned her face toward him. You're a woman who made choices and paid the price for them. That doesn't make you less worthy of respect. I was 17, she whispered. 17 and so sure I knew everything. He was charming and handsome, and he promised me things. Beautiful lies that I wanted so desperately to believe. Jake's jaw tightened. What happened to him? Gone the moment he learned about the baby. Disappeared like smoke. Katherine's laugh was bitter. My father was furious when he found out. He said I'd disgrace the family name, that I'd have to marry quickly or leave town. I was too proud to accept either option. So you left. I left. Found work as a governess, saved every penny I could. When I lost the baby, she closed her eyes. I thought maybe I could come home then, that enough time had passed. But I was too ashamed, too afraid of exactly what happened tonight. Jake reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You were young and trusting. That's not a crime. Isn't it? Katherine's green eyes searched his face. In the eyes of people like the Michaels, it is. People like the Michaels don't matter, Jake said firmly. What matters is what you do now, who you choose to be from here forward. Katherine studied his face, looking for judgment and finding only understanding. Why are you being so kind to me? You could use this to break our partnership, take back full control of the saloon. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his thumb still tracing the curve of her cheek. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the saloon. What's it about now? You, he said simply. It's about you. Katherine's breath caught. Jake? I know I have no right to say this, not after what you've been through. But these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you work. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. You've changed everything for me, Katherine. I've never felt this way about anyone before. I can't ask you to take on someone like me, someone with my history. You're not asking. I'm choosing. Jake's hands framed her face. I'm choosing you, Katherine Beaumont, with all your history and all your scars, if you'll have me. Katherine searched his eyes, looking for the doubt or disgust she'd grown accustomed to seeing in others. Instead, she found only warmth and acceptance and something that looked suspiciously like love. Are you sure? She whispered. People will talk? Let them talk. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. I've been alone my whole life, Katherine. I don't want to be alone anymore. Katherine felt something break open inside her chest, a wall she'd built around her damaged soul cracking and crumbling away. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. I don't want to be alone either, she admitted. Jake's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Katherine met him halfway. Their lips touched tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. When they finally broke apart, Katherine rested her forehead against his. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out together, Jake replied. One day at a time. 6 months later, Sheriff Jake Morrison and Katherine Beaumont were married in a simple ceremony at the Silver Dollar, surrounded by the friends they'd made and the community they'd built together. Reverend Michaels performed the service with obvious reluctance, but he performed it nonetheless. Katherine wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers picked from the hills outside town. Jake wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. When he kissed his bride, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Katherine looked up into Jake's eyes and saw her future reflected there, not perfect, perhaps, but real and true and worth fighting for. "No regrets?" Jake asked softly. Katherine smiled, her hand tightening in his. "Not a single one." They'd both learned that love wasn't about perfection or pristine reputations. It was about choosing someone despite their flaws, or perhaps because of them. It was about building something beautiful from broken pieces and refusing to let the judgment of others define your worth. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Jake and Katherine held each other close and looked toward a future filled with possibility. They'd gambled everything on love and won the only prize that truly mattered, each other. The Silver Dollar continued to thrive under their joint management, becoming not just a saloon but a cornerstone of the community. Jake eventually resigned his position as sheriff to focus on their growing business empire, and Katherine became known throughout the territory as a shrewd businesswoman and devoted wife. Years later, when people told the story of Jake Morrison and Katherine Beaumont, they spoke of it as a love story for the ages, proof that redemption was possible for anyone brave enough to reach for it, and that sometimes the greatest treasures were found not in gold or silver, but in the courage to love and be loved in return. Their legacy lived on in the Silver Dollar, where their portrait hung above the bar for generations to come, a reminder that love could conquer even the harshest judgment, and that every ending could be a new beginning for those bold enough to write their own story.